What is going on, my retro people? Welcome back to another episode of the Retro Wayfarer podcast. I am said Retro Wayfarer. How was everybody's holiday and all that good stuff? Mine cannot complain. I mean, technically I could, but you know, what's the point? You might hear me clear my throat a little bit. I'm a little bit under the weather. But today we are going to talk about the Atari 2600. Now, the Atari 2600 was released September 11th, 1977. It was insane. It is old, but it is phenomenal. Now, the 2600 came bundled with 2 joystick controllers, a conjoined pair of paddle controllers, and a game cartridge, which initially started out as combat. And later, that turned into Pac-Man. And, I mean, we all know what Pac-Man is. Pac-Man is the shit. But it was intense. It was a great system. It really was. You know, Atari's owner was going to sell the Atari to Warner Communications in 1976 in exchange for a cash infusion to speed up its development. But the initial production for the console's November 1977 release was actually made at Atari's Sunnyvale, California location. And then the future units ended up being produced in Hong Kong and Taiwan. And the Atari was insanely fun. It really was. It was a good console. It was actually founded by Nolan Bushnell and Ted Dabney. And their first major product was Pong in 1972. And that was actually one of the first successful arcade games. And then they eventually transitioned it into a home console version around 1975. And, I mean, that thing just took off. It was insane. It was a fun console, simple. So in 1977, the unit was actually priced at $200, well, $199, which currently would be $805 if you had the inflation. Now, also with the cartridge that it came with at launch, there were 8 additional games that were available at launch as well, but those were sold separately. And Atari sold between 350,000 and 400,000 VCS units. That is insane. And then, you know, it was outsourced to Hong Kong in 78, and they produced 800,000 units. But they slowed down a little bit when it came to sales, because there was only 550,000 sold by year end. God, I don't know why I can't talk today. But there was a ton of games, and the games were published by Atari, but they were also licensed to Sears, which released games under its Telegames brand. And there was like 3D Tic-Tac-Toe, the Action Pack, Adventure, Asterix, Asteroids, Battle Zone, Berserk, Breakout, Centipede, Cookie Monster Munch, Crystal Castles, Dig Dug, Double Dunk. I mean, there were so many damn games that it was ridiculous. And, Atari continued to acquire licenses for the 2600, and the most prominent of those actually included Pac-Man. And it was insane, but by mid-1984, most software development for the 2600 had stopped, except by Atari and Activision. Now, in 1986, the Atari Corporation released a redesigned model, and they supported by an ad campaign touting the price of under $50. What? That is nothing. That really is nothing. And then, after over 14 years on the market, the 2600 line was formally discontinued on January 1st, 1992. As far as the console goes, the CPU was an MOS Technology 6507. And it ran at 1.19 megahertz, which is insane. That is insane. How much RAM do you think this thing had? It had 128 bytes of RAM. That's it. And as far as graphics goes, the 2600 did not use a frame buffer, but it used two bitmap sprites called missile sprites. I mean, the hardware is insanely flexible. And the standard joystick was literally a button and a joystick. It's insane. A lot of people, again, don't realize how simple this console was. Now, one game that was a complete and utter failure, which you may or may not have heard of, was E.T., the Extraterrestrial. That game was a flop. But, they say that and Pac-Man are blamed for contributing to the video game crash of 1983. Pac-Man, I think, was good. As far as E.T., that was just terrible. Missile Command was another big game. And it's just a super, super simple game. And people don't realize, back then, if you had this, that was a sign. I mean, not only did it speak a little bit that you had money and all that, but it was a conversation starter. It was something to have friends come over, to bring people together and play some Pong or some Missile Command. And a lot of people take that shit for granted. They don't really realize what they had, what was going on, what things were back then. Some people absolutely hated it and others got into it. But as you can see from where we're at today, enough people got into this thing to be able to just continue the flow of gaming and the popularity of gaming and bring it forward and to us. That's just nuts. It really is. To think that it all started, so long ago. And again, Pong, was a big thing. It drew a lot of limelight to gaming. And that was literally 2 rectangles on each side of the screen that you could move up and down, and a square going around that was the ball. And literally all you would hear is boop, 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 boop. And, you know, the soundtrack was extremely limited. That's what the sounds were, was the ball hitting the paddle, or I believe the wall too, or the sides. I mean, it was insane. But the Atari 2600 was underestimated. Not a lot of people give it credit for what it did and what it was worth. And I want to be one of those that gives it credit. So, Atari 2600, I love you. And, you know, I know this is kind of a brief episode when it comes to a console and all that stuff, but, I mean, there's not much to say about the Atari. Being it wasn't as popular, I didn't want to go as in-depth. I just wanted to hit the few key points and notes, some of the games, stuff like that. But it's not bad. It is not a bad console. If you ever get the chance to play a game from it, give it a try. But for now, stay nerdy, stay geeky, and stay retro as fuck.